Hi, I'm Tom Chandler. Welcome to my shop. I'm working on a fiberglass project that is a little bit outrageous because of its size. It's the Maverick. It has nothing to do with Ford. It's one man's dream from the early 50s. The project's moving along quite well. We started with a body shell that was in pretty rough shape. It was warped, had lots of impact damage, and right now we're close to being ready for primer. It's moved a long ways from when we started. It's been the Maverick was designed to fit on a early 50s Cadillac chassis, a Series 62. We'll show you the chassis after a bit. Walk around the car. What we've been doing most recently is working on the trim parts, and I've got them all fitted to the car, and we're pretty happy with the fits. The grille is from I think a 1940 LaSalle. The headlight rims, the car was designed to take headlight rims from a Lincoln Cosmopolitan. In reality, the ones that I had from Cosmopolitan did not fit well. Very hard to get a tight fit. And so we basically created our own out of tubular aluminum, some flat aluminum, did a little bit of shaping and finessing and a lot of polishing and some pretty good welding by a friend. And they do fit quite nicely now. The bumpers are made out of just straight half-inch aluminum. It was a style and a design that we could do in the shop here, and that was the spirit of this car when it was created. Things that could be found, applied to it locally or off of other cars. The original Maverick for bumpers had a stock LaSalle bumper going clear across the front, and it cut right in front of the beautiful grille. I wasn't too happy with that, so we took the liberty of creating the bumpers you see here. With some research, there was precedent of these blade bumpers being used on a variety of cars, including Cadillac in the 30s. Much of the design of this car took cues from the 30s. Another area that we changed slightly from the prototype, probably not slightly, is the windshield frame. Those of you that know cars will probably see more than a little bit of auburn in that. We had these cast at a metal caster locally here from wooden patterns that we made in the shop. Virtually all of the trim has been made out of pieces that you can buy locally. The spine down the center is just half round aluminum. The hood ornament that we're using is actually from a Kaiser. We didn't have an original. We actually liked this better than the original, and the cars that were made by Maverick were also individual, but whatever the owner wanted was pretty much what they could have. Let's do a walk on around. I don't know if you can get to the side trim here or not, but we put a half round down the side and then a trim at the bottom. And the trim is all formed, waiting for polishing, which will be a relatively slow process, but it should polish up quite nicely. In the back, we've done a Fender Skirt, or spats as I think they used to be called. I liked the closed wheel look. It made the car flow better in my mind. In reality, for such a large car, the balance of the style, considering it's a backyard design, is really very nice. From a distance, if you don't see someone with it, you don't realize how huge it is, because it is quite well balanced. Sterling really loved a lot of the cues from the 30s, from the classics. As you can see, he put a boat tail into this. for no other reason than style, which is what they were for in the 30s too. It's quite a long boat tail. Comes back to bumpers similar to what we put on the front. And for the tail lights, I have echoed what we did with the headlights in the front, only this time with, of course, smaller bezels. And I think, I don't know if the camera will get it or not, but inside this one you can see the lens is in place. And I don't know that we have enough light to show that in there, probably not. The car was designed or built with one door. The original prototype had no doors, but one door became standard, and I think a second one he listed as an option. Don't know if any were made. It was not well hinged when we got it. In fact, it hardly worked at all. We've basically rebuilt the whole thing, and all we used out of the original door was the skin and the basic hinges. Modified them to the point where we could get better adjustment on them, a lot solider, and we're getting a pretty good close, and our shut line is quite acceptable now. We don't have any weather stripping in it yet, and I'm hoping that that will silence the close a little bit. But it's a pretty good fit, and we've got a latch mechanism that works quite well. The hood was another issue. The original hood, as it came, had hinges clear at the front, very narrow together. The back was extremely heavy, and it wobbled all over the place, and you made it very hard to reach things. So this is a modification we made. We hinged at the rear. To do this, we had to create new hinges. And basically the design came off a car from the 30s. What has to happen with this V-shaped hood, it actually has to lift up and forward a little initially, otherwise those corners would dig right back into the body. We made prototypes out of strips of oak, and then we made another prototype out of heavy PVC, and finally these were done in aluminum, and they work quite well, and it's quite well balanced for us now. And it closes, and again we're getting the shut line quite accurate, a little bit of finessing left to do on that, but I think we're going to be happy with the way it works. We're going to give you a shot now of the side profile of the car, a little bit front to back here. It's a little hard in the shop here to get away from it and really see the whole thing, but it really does coordinate quite well with the cockpit and the long hood and the long tail. We're going to give you a little tour underneath the car now, because there was a great deal of work. Went on under there. When we got the body, it had virtually no bulkheads in it. It had about either 6 or 8 rather crude body mounting points made out of heavy angle iron, and most of them were coming loose from the fiberglass. I chose to create bulkheads out of plywood and bond them in similar to what you would do with a boat. We've created many attachment points to the frame so the weight will be spread. This shouldn't be a squeaky body, or it should be quite solid with the frame when we're done. We've had it on and off multiple times, and before we're through, it will probably still be on and off many more times. Some of the bulkheads were actually used to stiffen and reshape the plywood. Some were used for mounting points to the frame. Some were for attachment of firewall and other things like that. Why don't you walk back and just shoot? Yeah, go along the side there. You get a pretty good idea of what we did with the door for hinges and a new door frame. And here's the chassis that we have for the car. It is a 1953 Cadillac Series 62. It's really quite a good chassis. Supposedly restored when we got it. Well, that was somebody else's idea of restoration. It is a good running chassis. Before we put finishes on it, we put ignition to it and temporary gas and fuel pump and ran it. I went through all the brakes. At one point we hauled it to a test track area, and it made quite a few nice laps, and the transmission, everything seemed to work very well. Have not torn the engine down, don't intend to. It has good compression and generally quite even. In the original literature that was put out for this car, it was stated that the body was built to fit on a Series 62 Cadillac chassis with some modifications. Never really spelled out those modifications. Once we got into the project, there were really quite a few more than you would have thought. The engine, to be balanced at all, is back, oh, I'm guessing it's almost a foot. Moved from these motor mounts to these motor mounts. Otherwise, it was all stuffed way up under the nose of the car. You couldn't reach things to work on them, and it looked kind of strange. When you move that engine back, you had to deal with the X cross member for the transmission and refit it. It also meant that I left the power steering where it was and the brake master where it was, but then the exhaust didn't fit, so we had to create special headers for it. You can see them laying out here. They fit quite well now. We need to get us a high heat finish on those. The radiator, I actually moved the bottom forward and then slanted it back, as you can see, so that it would fit under the body well. It appears he never had a fan on this. I have put an electric fan on the front of the radiator because the way this car will be used will be hopefully more to move it around show fields than go down the highway, although we never know. You can go on around the other side. Things did get a little tight around the exhaust header on this side and the steering box and the brake arm, but it's all fitting well now. We did put all new lines on it. You can see we've got the metal firewall in here, and I've also got the metal pieces fabricated that will take that on out to the body. Go ahead and move on back. Floorboards are going to be plywood. I'm just making a pattern for the tunnel section, which we should get at shortly. In the back, we found that the original rear axle was really noticeably too wide to go under the body. I'm not sure what that really meant in with the originals, but we looked at replacing the axle with something narrower and then decided we would modify the original axle, because now we kept all of the standard Cadillac parts with the exception of shortening it on each side by about 2 inches. And that meant cutting the frame in the back and narrowing the back end of the frame. So those few modifications turned into some pretty timely work, but it's turned out quite well. We did reshape the rear springs and took out, I believe, 2 leaves. this is going to be a much lighter car than the Cadillac body. We did that for ride height and also so that it's more compliant. In the front, we just went with a softer spring, and it was recommended that the original steering knuckles be turned upside down, and that gave the right ride height in the front. Again, that took a little more machine work than was suggested. The interior, we've done quite a bit of planning. This is the dash layout that we've chosen. I am using modern gauges with the period look. You can see a couple little knobs that I've started making. There's going to be about 6 switches in the center panel around the clock, and we're trying to make a knob that looks vintage. I've struggled to find anything available, and this may become an evening lathe project for me. There will be a shiny trim clear across the bottom, around the glove box, a real thin highlight, and around the center section. As far as the seating goes, we have the seat frame. It's all been fitted with the adjusting rails. It's sourced from a modern vehicle, and we needed something that the whole back would lean forward at the same time to get to the storage area, because there's no movable trunk lid. For wheels, we looked at stock Cadillac wheels and some of the accessory wheels available, but again we had some problems with wheel width and tire fit under the body. So I'm going with a new set of steel wheels that we're going to fit the sombrero wheel covers to, that are period pieces from Cadillac. I think they'll look quite nice, and we'll do a wide white wall that's also period. Well, that's about the tour of what we got going. What I'm showing you now is an artist concept of what's in my head for this car. We are planning to go with these colors and pretty much trim like it is. As you can see, the bumpers are a little bit different than we're drawn here, and we're using a different wheel. But looking forward to keeping this going, hoping to have it in primer and then paint the next few months here. Then we're down to a lot of details. We'll try to keep you posted, hopefully in a timely way. I really want to thank Jeff Hacker for his support and involvement in this project. He's been a great guy to work with.